The Escape from Tarkov market is absolutely down the drain for Escape from Tarkov's PvE mode, and we're gonna kind of discuss why that is, why you have seen hyperinflation within PvE, and potentially some issues going forward with the release of 1.0 if it's not actually counteracted within the game. And so the best case of inflation is you need to figure out what players are actually wanting on the game, on PvE for example, to actually get a relevant price of certain things, like how much free money does everyone have and is willing to spend on completing certain things within the game, because a lot of stuff within the game as it currently stands is not actually usable because of the fact that your hideout requires found in raid stuff. So a lot of the prices that you see on common items just doesn't really mean anything. And so how can we actually take a look at this? How can we find out whether there is a problem with the market on PvE? Well, let's dive into that. So on the 29th of April, there was a brand new patch 0.16.6, which saw the introduction of a new task line for high level players, allowing to level various skills. Completing the task line will unlock an additional special weekly task. Now, this in particular started off with a quest called Profitable Venture. And so Profitable Venture is the beginning of the task line, and it has, I believe, 8 quests in order to fully complete it and unlock the weekly tasks to give you levels to various different skills. So you can see here, this one gives us stress resistance, perception, tension, aim draws, and covert movement, plus 1 level to each of these, handing over 15 Tricon Reap IR. And so this is a very expensive task line to actually complete. You can see that by the fact that the prices on the flea of various different items is super expensive. And the problem is with this quest line is that obviously anyone that is playing the game and has leveled up has the ability to complete this, and so those who have the time, who have the money to actually complete this, are going to want to do it because it is a big benefit to anyone that does play Escape from Tarkov PvE mode. So how can we see the inflation? How can we see how this has impacted the economy? So this one, we've got the Tricon Reap IR, and you need 15 of them. I did a little bit of digging into how much that would actually cost, and the average cost of a Tricon Reap IR, if you were to do the barter trade, which doesn't require you to get actual only found in raid items for in order to submit into the Tricon Reap IR actual barter trade, which is microcontroller boards, which you can't just buy off of the flea. They're not able to be just bought off of the flea, is 1.24 million rubles per Tricon Reap IR. So that is the clock, the Rolexes, and the golden skulls, I believe. So that is the price of what it costs to actually get a Tricon Reap IR thermal scope as it currently stands. Now, previously to when this update went live, it was much more, well, it would have been cheaper. These items were not as expensive, but it's still very expensive, even if they were at like baseline discard value of whatever those would be. And during when the event actually went live, you saw clocks going as high as 5 million rubles for one clock. One clock that is currently worth about 70k roughly was going for 5 million rubles. Now, for the average player who is playing the game, you needed, I believe, 5 clocks per barter, which would have meant you would have spent 20 million just on clocks during that time period if you wanted to do it straight away. Now, that shows you that there is an abundance of money because it's all supply versus demand, and if people are just, you know, getting through the first stage of this and they're spending 20 million just for one use, you know, of the Tricon Reap IR, you need 15, so that would have been 300 million just in clocks. You know, it's gonna be very expensive. It tells you a telltale sign. But of course, then you move on to the next in the quest line, and if we jump on over, you come on over to Safety Guarantee. Now, Safety Guarantee requires you to get BNTI Zuck body armors, and they are the EMR version. So you can see here, this is the version, the green version of the Zuck, which, you know, is pretty rare. I mean, you don't find them in raid very often, and so getting those is quite difficult. They are able to be bought off of the flea, but the actual price of these, considering that you need 15, is 6.5 million rubles. That is the cheapest on the market at the time. They can go as high as 7, 8 million. It depends at the time of day. If it is the peak time of Tarkov, they're going to be even more expensive, which would cost you around about 98 million rubles just to complete the Zuck requirement of this task. And then you need Vulcans, which are yet again quite expensive because the only way you get them is through a barter trade, which is for a graphics card. And graphics card went up in price from about 200k to 450k. So those went up massively as well. And this just tells you the amount of surplus money everyone has within PvE, because it wouldn't go up as high if the actual amount of rubles wasn't there. So the demand is high. The supply is as normal, and so you just see exponential growth of these tasks and quests that are limited, or at least are sought after, the ones that people actually want to do, the ones that do require you to actually buy stuff that isn't found in raid. Those go flying up in price, especially if they don't have barter trades and they have to actually be found in the raid. So that is the issue with regards to these task lines, and why you're seeing some of these prices go flying high. But that's not everything, because I wanted to break down exactly how much it would cost for you to complete all 8 of these task lines. So there is 8 of them. There's profitable venture, safety guarantee, never too late, get a foothold, profit retention, a life lesson, and consolation prize. It might actually be 7 in total. So it's a long time. And then, of course, the final one is that you get a weekly operational task, which gives you a skill reward. So you get additional levels to skills, etc., as a weekly task instead of some of the other ones. Now, this in particular is okay. It is, you know, okay that we are going to be able to actually level up some of the skills by completing all of these tasks. But the issue is that because the market is so absolutely insanely inflated, with everyone basically making millions of rubles every single raid, and billions, if not trillions of rubles being made every single day, it kind of ends up with everyone has a ludicrous amount of money. And so how is that actually going to transfer when we move over to a non-wiped area within Tarkov itself when 1.0 gets released? So everyone is complaining about the fact that you have to reset, or a proportion of the player base of PvE is complaining about having a wipe or a reset within PvE's mode when 1.0 comes out in order to access the high tier content within the game, which is one of the biggest things that people have a complaint with. You know, they put in effort, they put in time in order to complete this, you know, their character to wherever they've got it, and now they've got to reset if they want to access the endgame content. It isn't forced, you don't have to do it, but if you want the new content that comes out with 1.0 release, you do have to reset your account according to the latest information from BSG, the developers of the game. And so, yeah, although you may not want to wipe, the issue is that as time goes on, it's only been 1 year of PvE being released at this point, and it's taken me a long time of grinding to make the rubles that I've got on my account. 1.338 billion rubles. Now, we've made more than that because we have a absolute ton of thick cases, items cases, you know, all of that sort of stuff. And we've got a ton of gear, so the overall stash value of me as a player is 1.79 billion rubles, which is, you know, a lot of money. But obviously, I am not an individual case. There are many people who have 2 billion, 5 billion, probably 10 billion rubles who have just been farming the money from the game, hitting up the best areas of the map and running through Tarkov however they want to do. And even if you aren't running specifically to make money on the game and you're only focusing on just combat and you're still picking up some of the items in the game, you're going to be well over hundreds of millions if you even get to level 66, you know, with the amount of time that you put in. Now, me as a content creator, I've done a lot more raids where I'm focusing on money to showcase runs for you guys to actually make money. So a lot of the time I am spending actually doing loot runs as opposed to what I would typically do in the game, which is just, you know, enjoying the combat aspect of the game itself. So that is also something to take note of. But obviously people play for different reasons, and I think a lot of people on Escape from Tarkov's PvE mode are specifically trying to end up using it as like a loot simulator, just grinding out a loot once you kind of get to that stage in the game where you've completed a lot of tasks and you're kind of in that end game stage where you can just farm money and enjoy the game for what it is once you've done your tasks, which a lot of people are doing. So that has caused this hyperinflation, and because we're not really losing money, there is no real easy way to lose money, even if you get taken out in a raid, because you have, of course, your pouch, which secures anything that you keep in there as what you can take out of a raid when you do get taken out. So any expensive things usually go in your secure container, and that means that you can then go ahead and sell it on the flea, because things don't have to be found in raid to be sold on the flea anymore, which means that even if you get taken out, you can sell everything that you do have in your raids on the flea even when you do get taken out, which I think does need to be changed for PvE, to be honest. Now, I appreciate that some people may find that annoying, but in terms of the health of the economy of the game, for new players wanting to get into the game, for people who are more casual players, I think that this would actually be a good change, because now it puts an emphasis on surviving your raids. It also means that you are not going to make as much money if you do actually get taken out, which is one of the aspects of Tarkov that I think makes it more enjoyable. It makes it more kind of risky. You know, when you have risk, it makes it more exciting when you don't get taken out or when you actually perform well, as opposed to, oh, well, I got taken out, but I still made 2 million rubles because I got 2 bitcoins. And so with the insurance also coming back at 100% spawn, or 100%, so you get everything when you do get taken out in PvE mode, because of the fact that insurance will always come back, provided that you aren't playing in a group and your group leave your stuff on the floor, and then scavs can actually loot your body and take stuff off and stuff like that. So you can get parts that are actually stripped off of your weapon, as well as gear taken out from insurance if you are playing in a group. But if you're playing on local servers, once you are done, the raid completely ends. That raid is done, and then it moves on to your hideout, and so the raid ends. So as soon as you're taken out, the raid ends, and so nothing can loot you before that raid ends. And so that is definitely something. I don't know about BSG servers, but I think that the BSG servers work the exact same, is that the server gets shut down directly after you get taken out. And so I never ever lose stuff, even if you do get taken out during those raids. So this is an issue that I think is compounded by the fact that we don't have found in raid items as a requirement to sell items on the flea. It also means that barter trades that you can do, for example, the mechanic barter for the black keycard, you can buy 5 tank batteries, 8 cyclones, an RFIDR and an SMT for about 4 million rubles. And the actual keycard itself, if we were to have a look at a 10 out of 10 use keycard, 5.8 million. So you can just generate 2 million rubles by just doing a barter trade for the black keycard. And so you make 2 million rubles with 0 effort in about 30 seconds of work, which obviously if you do that every time that the traders reset, and there are multiple different types of barters that you can do, it's just generating free money. The whole point about a barter trade in my eyes is that you can do it cheaply, provided that now you can't sell that item on the flea. If you find it in a raid, you get more money for the item if you want to sell it, or you can purchase a black key card, but then, you know, the value of it is more expensive, but doing a barter trade, getting the items itself is going to be cheaper. So, you know, you have that trade-off between, do you, you know, just buy it outright, or do you do the barter trade? And so that is something that I think is an issue, why some of this stuff has compounded upon each other and ended up with some of these tasks costing so much. So as a little breakdown of the costs of what it is actually going to cost you to do just this task line, remember. And remember, I have played over 1,000 hours within Tarkov's PvE mode, grinding out loot runs, doing a lot of loot-based stuff for you guys as part of videos. So a lot of the time I've spent on the game has been grinding out rubles to essentially make money. And so how much will this new task line, just this one task line within the game that is highly the demand for it is high, well, this is the breakdown of the cost. So I've listed all of the items required that you have to buy in order to complete the task line. Now, we are assuming that you are buying absolutely everything. You have nothing in your stash, or simply, you are just buying straight from traders, that sort of thing. It is the cheapest possible way of getting these items. That's what I've taken into account. Obviously, you can find stuff in the raid, but at the same time, this was what the equivalent cost would be. And even if you did find stuff in the raid, you could sell it for this cost. Even if you found everything in the raid, it would still be like sinking that amount of money into this task line anyway. So you can see there are some very significant costs. The biggest one being the Tiger 1 survival machetes, of which you need 8 of them, and they're currently going for 14.5 million rubles each. 14.5 million rubles each at 8 items required for this quest line, 116 million rubles. Just in this one bit of one of the tasks, I would have to spend about 8% of my total wealth through the entire game that I have ground out for an entire year. So 8% of my entire wealth of what I have available in my stash would go towards just this one part of one task. And then, of course, you have these body armors costing 98 million, yet again about 6 to 7% of my total wealth. So just in 2 of the requirements, I will have had to have put in about 15% of my total stash value. And then we have a look at some of the others, each of them costing millions of rubles, anywhere from 5 to 20 million rubles, some of them being significantly cheaper, where, 1.6 million, 400k, and various different ones being even higher than that. But what is the total? Well, the total is 307.257 million rubles to complete the task line. That is what it would cost you buying absolutely everything within the game. And whilst you may have some of these items, you still put them in and you would still be putting in that cost into it, because you could have essentially sell those items. Now, if you play hardcore, it doesn't matter. This doesn't matter to you. You're not using the flea market or anything like that. But it does impact everyone. The flea market definitely does impact everyone. And I'm sure a lot of you do not have 307 million rubles won the game to just spend on one specific task line. And whilst, yes, when you have a lot of money, these things do get rid of some of the money, because when you buy these items, they're getting removed from the flea and you're submitting them into a task which removes those rubles from the game, counteracting inflation. It still tells you that the inflation is crazy because of the fact of these prices of these items is so high in the first place. So whilst this sort of event does counteract it, it's an indicator as to how much inflation, how much money, how many rubles everyone has within the game. And if you're a new player, there is no way you would ever be able to even get close to completing this within any decent amount of time. For an example, 307 million rubles, if we were to have a look at my total stash value, so if we put the total stash value, I think there's an extra 0 on there. And so if we take my total stash value divided by, it would actually be the other way around. So that would be essentially 23% of my total stash value taken out on just this one quest line, which is pretty ridiculous in terms of how much money you're going to have to spend. Nearly a quarter of my entire stash is gone because of one quest line. And that shows you exactly what the sort of inflation is on the game. And if we look into the future, say that there was no kind of reset or something that you had to do to access the endgame content at the end of the year when 1.0 version of Tarkov actually gets released, when the full release of Tarkov comes out and people reset their accounts, say it went on for another year until next year, you could see these prices going way higher as more money is just entering into the game and not getting removed. So more of these sorts of things do wipe out more money off of the game, but it's still not proportional. These events very rarely come out where they're wiping off the rubles. So in the time period between this task line coming out and a new task line that is probably going to cost a similar sort of amount, you would probably have to wait 6 months, maybe longer. Maybe it wouldn't even come out for another year. And so you would essentially be earning 300 million, costing 300 million a year or every 6 months. And you can certainly earn way more than that within a 6-month period or even a year period. It is ludicrous how much money is being generated. And this doesn't even come close to combating the inflation within the game. And I think that is really the core thing that I wanted to talk about today, is just how much it costs you to complete these events because of the fact that everyone has so much money. And as a new player, I think it is really daunting to be seeing quest lines that are going to require you to spend, 300 plus hours, 400 plus hours in order to grind out the money, because a lot of my money was made at the beginning of PvE when there were some absolutely broken ways of making lots of money when loot was better, etc. Now it's much more difficult to do that, and so you could play a lot of raids earning 3 million rubles per raid every single time, which is like one of the pinnacle kind of amounts that you can earn. You could play 100 labs raids, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is still quite a lot. And so yeah, you would earn 300 million rubles. So 100 labs raids doing the exact same farming run, not opening up some of the areas which are more interesting, just to purely complete this task. So that's something I wanted to talk about. I think it's important, and I think that it addresses at least some of the issues that are coming out from seeing what a year worth of no wipes whatsoever within Escape from Tarkov PvE mode can do to the economy. And whilst I'm not a big fan of them kind of forcing wipe if they said that it's not actually going to be a thing, because a lot of casual players play the game, there does need to be somewhere where people can sink rubles in at a much more frequent period that is worth doing, so that we don't end up with new players feeling like there is no way they are going to be able to catch up. Because as with inflation, everything gets more and more inflated, and a lot of these items, the things that are worth a lot of money, they aren't actually found very commonly. So the often items that you're finding are, your typical, maybe you find a couple of stims which have been inflated. Maybe you find yourself some tape and stuff like this, which isn't really worth that much. But the exponential growth of the high tier items, things like the Tiger, these Zuck body armors, the thermal scope barters and stuff like this, they can triple in price, whereas the standard loot on the game that may be required in the lower levels is not going up, and the typical loot that you're finding in raids is not going up. So the disparity between the rich and the poor is just getting much worse. And whilst yes, you can find a Tiger as a brand new player on something, or in a marked room, maybe you found a marked room key or whatever, which you can make 20 million rubles off of, it's still nowhere near how much the inflation is actually going up and how much things are consistently expensive on the game. So I wanted to talk about it, kind of give my opinions on it, and just show you how much it would actually cost to complete this task line. Me as a player, I'm definitely going to do it, because the end of wipe, or at least the reset of PvE 1.0 is going to be a thing for me. I'm definitely going to reset my account back to 0 and do the entire game all over again. But for some of the players wanting to do this, maybe they don't want to reset their account, this is how much it is going to cost you. 307 million rubles currently on the flea as it stands when I made this video. So with that being said, if you got any questions, maybe you completely disagree with me, maybe you think that the market is absolutely fine, there's nothing wrong, and that having just no way of removing rubles from people's accounts and just making money after money is great. Maybe you agree with that. I don't know. but this is just what I've found so far. So with that being said, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.